From getting knocked out within the opening minutes of the opening bell to returning to redeem themselves in the rematches, the heavyweight division has some really interesting stories over the years. And that's because no one wants to give up being the baddest man on the planet. This is why the division has seen some of the most brutal wars in UFC history, which is expected when two giants try to battle it out inside the cage. But see, the problem with two giants going at it is that they often gas themselves out by the later rounds, and that's exactly what happened when Randy Couture met Pedro Rizzo. Well, the first time anyway. See, Couture went in for the kill early against the Brazilian, taking him to the ground and smashing his face in with punches and elbows. But by the third round, he was pretty much out of it, and Rizzo was still fresh despite the beating he got. The fight went the distance between these two, but despite Pedro dominating in the championship rounds, the judges decided to award the win to the defending champion, Couture. This sparked controversy, and a few months later in 2001, the two men met once again. But now Randy wasn't letting any dispute get in his way. He went in there and smashed around Rizzo once again with his signature dirty boxing in the clinch. Then he took the fight to the ground and opened the Brazilian's face up with his devastating elbows. And in the third round, he secured the win via TKO, cementing himself as a force to be reckoned with in the division. He proved that even though he may not be able to go 5 rounds, but he could finish his fights in less. And you know what that reminds me of? Cain Velasquez. Now, this guy was a monster in his prime, probably one of the most feared heavyweights in history. He could go fresh in the 5th round, and he could knock people out in the very first. After all, he trained in the legendary AKA with the likes of Daniel Cormier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Luke Rockhold. You know, guys with UFC gold to their name who were known for their dominance in the octagon. And even though Velasquez was dominant himself, he lost his first ever title defense, that too in an embarrassing manner. See, Junior Dos Santos was an extremely tough guy, and he was known for his knockout power more than anything. That's what happened in November 2011. With only about a minute into the fight, JDS connected with a devastating shot to Velasquez, and it was over right there and then. Now, obviously, Cardio Cain wasn't going to let that one slide, so these two met once again a year later, and this time Velasquez wasn't getting caught off guard. Instead, he battered Dos Santos for 25 minutes straight, but props to Cigano for riding it out. He didn't get knocked out nor got submitted. He took the beating to his face for a whole 5 rounds and still kept standing. The win obviously went to Cain for his performance, but it did leave a lot of questions around these two. The UFC was probably trying to make it a Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier kind of thing, so these guys were booked again for a 3rd time in 2013, and it was as anticlimactic as it could get. It was more of what happened in their last outing. Cardio Cain went on to beat his rival for 4.5 rounds, only this time he was able to get a finish in the final round, and nipping this rivalry right in the bud. Now, it would be almost criminal of me to talk about Randy Couture and Cain Velasquez, but not mention the legend that came in between, the Beast himself, Brock Lesnar. Lesnar's time in the UFC is mostly remembered for his rivalry with Frank Mir. You see, the Beast incarnate was on his promotion debut against Mir, and he was thrashing his opponent around inside the octagon. But the referee, Steve Mazzagatti, made a controversial call that Lesnar later protested in his own way. The Beast had Mir pinned on the canvas and was raining down bombs on him. In doing so, he landed an illegal strike to the back of the head. Now, usually when this happens, the fighters are verbally warned by the ref, but Mazzagatti decided to reset the match on their feet. Lesnar dropped Frankie Boy once again, but this time he was anticipating it, and he sunk in a deep knee bar on Brock, making him tap out of the fight. All of this action lasted for only the opening 90 seconds of the match, at the end of which Lesnar flew into a rage that lasted for over a year until these two met again.
All right, gentlemen, we're going over your instructions backstage. Protect yourself at all times. Follow my instructions. We're going to have a clean fight. Touch gloves, let's make it official.
This time, the WWE superstar was having none of it. He didn't rush into things like he did in the last fight. Lesnar took Mir down, kept him close, and started beating his face to a pulp. But somehow, Frankie Boy survived the first round. Brock took a couple of knees to the face in the next round, but still kept going. He scored another takedown, this time pinning Mir against the cage, and pounded on him until Herb Dean pulled the beast off. What followed was even uglier, as Lesnar kept yelling into Frank's already bloodied face during the post-fight interview. Brock unified the title with this win and defended it a couple of times, until Stipe Miocic came along. Now, of course, Lesnar never fought Miocic, but he retired after losing to Alistair Overeem and Cain Velasquez. But before hanging up his gloves, he set a record for most title defenses at only 2. Yeah, I know guys, that isn't a lot, but that's how unstable things are at heavyweight. Stipe came in and broke that record with 3 consecutive title defenses, but he faced his own demons at the hands of Cormier. DC was the light heavyweight champ back then and moved up a division to claim the double champ status against UFC's Stone Cold. In what was a 1-round fight, Cormier managed to connect with a solid right, and he turned out the lights for Miocic. Stipe waited a year for his revenge, and he finally got it in 2019. And boy, was this a war between these two legends. This fight could have easily gone the distance if the firemen didn't go for DC's body. It is still remembered to this day. Miocic won the back and his belt at the end of the 4th round of the match. This reminds me of the guy who dethroned Stipe, Francis Ngannou. If it hadn't been for Miocic, Ngannou would have been the baddest man on the planet back in 2018. The Predator was riding a high and had been undefeated before this, and his stocks were soaring after what he did to Overeem. But Stipe put on a clinic to smother the African powerhouse. Ngannou went in hard in the first round, but he gassed himself out. After that, it was Stipe's show, as he kept scoring takedowns on the Predator almost at will, and it seemed as if the Cameroonian had no answer and no stamina to defend against that. Miocic secured an easy unanimous decision. 6 months later, the Predator suffered another loss, this time at the hands of Derek Lewis. But Ngannou wasn't giving up that easily. He went on to tear the division apart, knocking out Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, all in the very first round. And he finally got a rematch with the first guy who ever defeated him. This time, Francis was out for blood, as he knocked out the then reigning champ in the 2nd round, with a very scary short left hook. Since then, as you guys know, the Predator parted ways with the UFC. Now all eyes are on Jon Jones to see where he leads the division after his win over Cyril Gane. These were the best heavyweight rematches in UFC's history.